Alright, so how to make your blockers for the drawing and for the photograph. So I'm going to show you guys how to make the big blocker first. So to do this, I'm going to actually use my pastel paper that's already been gridded to use that as a guideline for how to get my big blocker set up. So I'm actually going to just use the paper, and I'm going to use the lines that I drew as a guideline. Provided, of course, I did this right, this should work, but if I did the grid on the gray paper wrong, then it's not going to work. So this is where, you kind of hope that you did things the right way. So I'm kind of trying to move this so you guys can see this a little bit better. There we go. So I've just got it lined up against these lines. It's kind of hard with how big this paper is. So I've got my first one lined up here. I'm going to use the lines over here to line that up. So again, you want to be pretty darn close to perfect on this. I hate to use that word, but when you're using the grid method, it needs to be spot on. So I've got that. Once you've got it lined up, I'm going to take masking tape. Need 2 small pieces, and you're going to take that masking tape and just tape them right there, and I'm going to tape on the other side too. That way they stay together, okay? So that part is done. Now I want to move my pastel paper, so I don't want to get any ink on it. And I'm going to take a ruler, and I'm going to mark every inch on this. So you're going to start in the corner, right here. Make sure it's all lined up, and it's pretty well close to perfect again. So I'm going to take a black pen. You can do this in pencil if you want to, and then go back over it with pen, but I think doing these marks in pen's best because pencil does get worn off. They get smudged, so if you put in an ink pen, it'll stay put. I would not recommend doing Sharpie just because Sharpie markers do tend to bleed, and so your marks may not be as accurate. So, alright, so I'm going to do this also too on this side. So you're just going to mark every inch until you run out of room. There you go. And so that's how that big blocker is going to look, and you want to make sure that you put your name on that because everybody's is going to look the same. So that's your big blocker. Now, to make your small blocker, you're going to need a couple things. You're going to need, actually a metal ruler works best. You need a square template, which I have. You need a 3-inch square piece of white paper. You need map board to cut on top of, an X-Acto blade, pen again, and pencil. So you need quite a lot. Alright, so I'm going to take my 3-inch square white paper. I'm going to take this square template, and I need to find the 1-inch square. So you're going to just put this in the middle of your paper. It doesn't have to be perfectly in the middle. So just put it in the middle. I'm just going to take my pencil and trace the square. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a metal ruler, and you want to use the metal rulers because if you use the plastic ones, the X-Acto blade will cut into it. So whenever I'm using the X-Acto blade to cut a straight line, I always use a ruler as a guide. It just helps keep it straight. So I'm just going to use this X-Acto blade, start cutting around. Now when you use the X-Acto blade, if you notice that it is pulling or tearing the paper, then it's most likely because you have a dull blade. I think it just moved a little bit. There we go. So just keep cutting around until you get the whole thing cut. And you're always cutting on top of a piece of mat board just because that way it protects the table, because you will cut lines into it. And the boards to cut on top of are in the drawer that just says mat board, or X-Acto boards. So there you go. So you're going to throw away actually a square. This is the part that you want to keep. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to mark every 1/4 of an inch around at each edge. So what I do, I'll just take this, and I like to mark my 1/2 inch mark first. Make sure that's in the middle. And then I'll mark 1/4 inch marks then after that. I'll go around. You want to do this all the way around. Again, same thing. Start with the 1/2 inch mark, the 1/4. Again, you got to be pretty close to perfect on this, so be very precise. I'm doing this with an ink pen again, not a Sharpie and not a pencil. But if you want to, you can start it off in pencil and then just ink over your lines. Totally up to you, but I would end in pen. So it looks like that, and then I like to go through and make a 1/2 inch mark a little bit longer so it's easier to identify. That'll be the midpoint. And that just helps that stand out a little bit. And then on these, a lot of times what I'll do, again, same thing, I'll go through and I will basically make the every 2 inch mark a little bit longer so it's, again, easier to identify. So go through and mark every 2 inches. Make those marks a little bit longer. And you'll see why that's important later. So again, put your name on it so that you can see this. So this is marked every 1/4 inch, and then I marked on this every 1 inch. So that's what it should look like when you're finished.